Welcome to the channel, Commanders. My name is Drew Wager, one of the official authors who contributed to the narrative of the game. If you're looking for lore and history background on Elite Dangerous, you've come to the right place. This is the Dynasty Project. Of all the many conspiracies that have taken place within the timeline of humanity, what became known as the Dynasty Project guarantees a high place in any rankings due to its scope, import, and sheer audacity. It was conceived by the mysterious cabal known collectively as the Club, and the available records indicate that it was planned in the mid-33rd century, sometime prior to its initial execution, which occurred in the period 3269 to 3271. Following the revelations about the Intergalactic Naval Research Arm, known colloquially as INRA, and Thargoid activity in the mid-3250s. INRA itself was disbanded in 3253, but not before it had created a deadly fungus-based bioweapon known as Mycoid, which was deployed against the Thargoids by a certain Commander John Jameson. As a result of the deployment, the Thargoids were driven out of human-controlled space. At the time, the official stance was that humanity had been victorious over the Thargoids, and that was an end to the matter. The story of INRA and the late Commander Jameson will be covered in a future lore update. In reality, the Thargoids certainly had retreated, but not solely due to humanity's efforts against them. In fact, one pundit was quoted as saying, "The first Thargoid war? Yeah, well, we called it a war. To the Thargoids, it was barely a skirmish." Military intelligence on the Thargoids, classified at a high level and hidden from the general populace, indicated the Thargoids had been regarded as an existential level threat to humanity, and remained so. However, public perception of the Thargoids was increasingly ridiculed by various means instigated by the Club, so that as the decades passed, very few people actually even believed the alien race existed and wasn't just spacer tales in the Null G bars, the symptom of one too many Listian evil juices perhaps. By the year 3300, they were no longer a topic of conversation at all, and any reports of them were dismissed as urban legends. Whilst this might seem bizarre to modern observers, few civilians had ever interacted with the Thargoids in the earlier altercation. Thargoid ships had only been encountered by the military, and a few more daring independent commanders on long-range trips, and the Thargoids had never actively invaded human-controlled space. However, it was suspected that the Thargoids retreated not merely due to the impact of the Mycoid weapon. During the 3260s, intelligence sources reported that the Thargoids themselves were involved in some kind of internecine warfare with multiple species of Thargoid, more correctly known as dynasties, fighting each other for superiority. Two particular dynasties, codenamed the Eresrians and the Klaxians, appeared to be in the ascendancy, each regarding the other as mortal enemies. This information was sparse and incomplete, inferred only from captured Thargoid ships and attempts to decode hull markers, symbols, and other differentiations, but appeared to have been compelling enough for the Club to act upon. Certainly this dynastical differentiation has yet to be confirmed by modern Thargoid experts, leading to speculation that either the intelligence was wrong, or that the internecine warfare between the dynasties was resolved by the Thargoids, or that the inferior dynasty was exterminated prior to the Thargoids impinging on human-controlled space again. Back in 3260 though, coupled with tactical data on Thargoid spacecraft abilities, particularly their superior hyperdrive technology, a series of strategy simulations were carried out on the behest of the Club. This indicated that in many scenarios, the core worlds of humanity would risk being overrun and subjugated by a potential Thargoid invasion. It was theorized that the Eresrian dynasty, suspected of being on the losing side of the Thargoids' internal war, might use humanity as a meat shield, allowing the Klaxians to vent their wrath on human worlds, whilst the Eresrians either beat a retreat or regrouped elsewhere. The existence of humanity was deemed to be at stake. As a result, the Club invoked a number of initiatives in the decades between 3260 and 3300. Amongst these were political events that ultimately led to the abolition of the London Treaty, which had previously prevented the superpowers from expanding their fleets of large military vessels. A CQC championship aimed at identifying highly skilled independent pilots, and various efforts to frustrate explorers who might either antagonize the Thargoids or reveal evidence of their existence to the wider civilian population. On top of all this came the Dynasty Project itself. The worst-case scenario identified had the core world centered around Sol, Achenar and Alioth completely subjugated under Thargoid invasion, with humanity either dispersed or eradicated. Estimates of casualties in such a scenario were in the trillions, with humanity's very existence in peril. In the 3260s, the core worlds encompassed a much smaller area than they do in the present day, and there were no far-flung outposts such as Colonia where humanity might retreat to if threatened. Hyperspace technology was far more primitive, with ships taking many weeks to undertake journeys which nowadays can be covered in mere minutes. The Dynasty Project's initial goal appears to have been to locate viable locations of far away from the core worlds, identify Earth-like worlds, or those that might be terraformed, and mark them with beacons for future settlement. Temporary bases would be set up in the regions to enable further exploration. The expeditions would be highly classified, with the crews of the expedition mostly unaware of the mission goals, and recruited from a selection of people without close family ties, so their long absences would not be noticed. The club deemed humanity should not be informed about the potential calamity until plans were in place to counter it effectively. 3 zones were identified, one directly opposite the inferred route of Thargoid invasion, and 2 at right angles to that route, based on the galactic orientation. These were the Scutum Sagittari Conflux, Hawking's Gap, and the Formidine Rift. With the technology available at the time, such an undertaking was a huge expense and with massive risk. No vessels had previously ventured out that far due to the inability to repair hyperdrive systems without dock facilities, and hyperdrive tech of the time was prone to failing without regular servicing. So it was determined the expeditions would have to carry enough resources and technical capability to be effectively self-sustaining. The logistics of this were immense, and ultimately 3 megaship-class vessels, accompanied by a support fleet of long-range Anaconda-class vessels, were constructed and prepped for departure to these zones, some 10,000 light-years away. A terrifying distance even to the most hardened explorers of the time, and the estimated round-trip travel time was over a year. With preparations complete, the fleets departed in late 3269, aiming to arrive in the vicinity of their targets in mid-3270.